Hello, everyone. Today we have a podcast here for you, and this is recorded by our Pink Shirt YYC Collaborative, which is made up of a few different agencies, including Antics Community Arts, 12 Community Safety Initiative, Calgary Immigrant Women's Association, and the Urban Society for Aboriginal Youth. And with us today, we have Hannah, Yolani, Arusa, Kaylin, myself, which is Stephanie, and Nabiha. And we're going to talk to you today about anti-bullying and maybe some problems that we see are common with bullying, especially right now, things that we notice or that we want to make change, and how you yourself can maybe make some change in your community and in your school, and how you can stand up against bullies. Welcome everybody here to our podcast. All right, everybody, I'm going to get into our first question here. What are the effects of lockdowns and physical separation on bullying?
I think that due to physical distancing and lockdowns, we've become a bit more disconnected, I guess, because we aren't able to talk with our friends as much or hang out with them. So I think that cyberbullying has seen an increase during COVID due to that because when we were home during the lockdown, we did Google Meets for school and stuff, and we were virtual basically the entire day. So I think that has affected cyberbullying.
I 100% agree. Over the lockdown for the past 3 years, I go online and I see so much more hate online. And I can see in person too when I go out. People are becoming a little bit more accepting. They're more appreciative of the people they can see in person now. So I've noticed a decrease in my actual environment outside in person, but online people hide behind a screen and they do whatever they can.
Maybe people are more rude online and say things that maybe they wouldn't say to somebody in person.
I think that because of how Nabi has said about being online, that people are able to hide behind a mask, I guess. So they're able to say whatever they want online, right? Because they never know again. So I guess they're more confident online. And then whereas in person, it's a bit different because you haven't seen this person in a while. So
I'm gonna jump in here real quick. I definitely agree with both of you guys. It's so much easier nowadays because we've shifted everything online to hide behind the screen and say a lot of hateful and rude things towards people because you never have to face them in person, right? And if you do get the chance to face them in person, what are the chances of you saying the same thing to that person's face, right? So it's so much easier to engage with negative people online.
Yeah, that's true, especially with all these apps nowadays, like Instagram, TikTok, especially TikTok. I don't know if you guys go on TikTok, but on TikTok, when you see tons of videos and you look at the comments, and there's just every comment is someone being mean or saying something, right? And that does a lot to someone's mental health, especially if say a TikTok gets roaming around the school and then someone's commenting on it, and you know who that person is saying hurtful things on the comments.
I've noticed too that in general, it seems like folks are more polarized lately. There's so many more black or white of the issue. There's not these gray options in between. It's either you're for or you're against something. You're either for this item or you're against it. And anybody that's across the spectrum of your thoughts becomes demonized, and you have the opportunity to bully them or say harmful or hurtful things to them. In general, that's what I've noticed more as well online. There's not these barriers, and people are saying everything that comes into their heads that can be quite hurtful when you're on the other side of that.
yeah, I was going to say that another effect of COVID on bullying is that school bullying has dramatically, I think, decreased because for one thing, we've been in lockdowns for so long. And I guess another thing could be about the physical distancing.
I have actually noticed that there has been a little bit of a difference in bullying. There's been more verbal bullying because obviously people are scared with COVID.
Yeah. Do you think there's been any differences in bullying too with the fact that we've been moving online, offline. Have you noticed any increase or changes in bullying that way? Or do you have any personal experiences that you would like to share?
This is like mostly in older populations, I've noticed, because in the younger populations, it doesn't make much of a difference, right? I've also noticed that there's a lot more hate towards Asian people and people of color for some reason. They're like, oh, they have caused the virus, which is completely wrong.
Yes, for sure. That's been a big trend right now is increased racism towards Asian folks because of this virus and because some folks think it began there.
So, as in the education sector, if you go like online, it's itself is like a problem and itself is like giving mental stress to the students. And for my personal experience, I have gone in the last semester like some online and some going offline, some gone online again in person. So it gives me like a little bit of a chaos just because it's mentally stressed and mentally tired going to the school in person and becoming tired again. So it become a little bit of a stress by this COVID physical distancing and everything going on the education sector.
Yes, for sure. Wonderful point there. Rusa, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say is that I think people are like looking for someone to blame because, like you said, now it's like a black and white sort of thing. So they're looking for someone to blame, and then they wrongly blame people of color. So then it leads to increased racism, and then I don't think that's really getting addressed right now because of COVID. It leads to like other issues to be dismissed. This has been a big thing for 3 years.
That's a very good point, Arusa. It's almost like because we are now spending more time reflecting in our worlds that we've been able to bring some of these other issues that have always been around to the surface and put them out in the forefront of things. It's making folks more aware of these issues at this point. That leads really wonderfully into our next question here about what is a microaggression and how to be aware if you're engaging in microaggressions.
I think a microaggression is like a subtle, normalized form of racism, and it's not always conscious. It can also be like you're unconsciously saying these things, and then these things sort of lead up to bigger issues. And I think a way that can be more aware is to ask for boundaries for the people that you're talking to. Ask them if it's something because someone might not always tell you that it's hurting them, and then you might figure out later on. So it's not like you can read minds, right? So you sort of have to ask.
Yes, for sure, Arusa. Often we might not even know if we're committing a microaggression towards somebody. As Arusa described, it can often be an unconscious action or something you're saying that you might not know that it's actually a microaggression for the other person. So, are there any ways that we can stand up for ourselves if somebody's always engaging in microaggressions with us?
I think that the best way to like confront them, to ask them, because sometimes you might interpret it differently or they might not mean it the way that you think. So you could ask them if that's how they mean, and you could also maybe like educate them on things that they can say or can't say.
Yes, I think that's very wonderful, Arusa, that sometimes they might not know they're committing a microaggression. So if you let them know where your boundaries are and you set your boundaries with them and explain to them how they're hurting you, that gives them more of a framework of what is okay or what's not okay or what is acceptable because they might not be aware of their own unconscious bias. Does anybody else want to weigh in about microaggressions?
I can jump in here. I think what Abrusa said about setting boundaries is very, very important when it comes to understanding each other. The more we understand each other, the less kind of pokey we can be at each other. We don't lash out as much, right? I think that when you're being kind of targeted for these like microaggressions, feel free to also mention it, call the other person out for it, because like Stephanie said, they may not know that they're doing it. So just giving them a quick heads up, like, hey, that wasn't really nice and that kind of hurt my feelings, can also make a really important difference when dealing with like these small microaggressions.
I think adding on to what Hannah said as well is not just calling folks out when they do it to us, but if you see folks doing microaggressions to other people too, like in your friends, feel free to stand up and try and voice for those folks as well. Because sometimes if a microaggression is being done to yourself, you might not always have the courage to speak out and say to that person that they're actually hurting you. But sometimes it's a little bit easier to be able to do that for your friend or your sibling or one of your family members. It's easier to stand up for them. So make sure to also support your friends and family as well.
I'd like to add on here as well. And another thing too for microaggressions is not a lot of students know what the term means.
Mhm.
I certainly didn't when I was in middle school and high school. So I think one way to do this, help with this, would be to advocate for your school, to maybe let everyone know, maybe posters or something, to know what microaggressions are, and if you are doing them, stop them. And I think once a student or someone actually knows what they're doing and knows like what it does to a person, especially their mental health, then hopefully it would help.
How do you think we can be more aware of our own unconscious bias and judgments of other folks?
I think one of the ways you can do this is not to be like offended when someone calls you up for this, because I know that for certain people, if you like call them out on it, then they act like really offended, or if you said something really mean to them, when in reality you're just trying to educate them and let them know. So I think it's like not to take it personally, I guess, because those are unconscious biases. So it might not even be your fault. It could be like a societal bias that you may have, or a media bias or something.
That's a wonderful point, Arusa. And all of us at some point in time will have some unconscious bias. And we just need to be adaptable and willing to learn and willing to understand where other folks are coming from so that we can always be learning and growing ourselves as humans.
In our society too, we have a lot of stereotypes, and when you come up to people, like, that may be something you see unconsciously, of course, because like being online or like growing up around people, they might pass it on to you. So like a good way to maybe overcome it is look past the stereotypes. Instead of noticing, oh, they have this color hair, maybe ask them, oh, like, when's your birthday, when favorite color, get to know them before you judge.
Thank you, Nabiha, for that. That's a very wonderful point that often we'll have less biases or judgments about folks once we know them and once we know more about them. Yolani, do you want to weigh in?
So, as of the religious sector, people are thinking about the rituals and each other's things that they do in for the festivals. They think that that is not good for, even if we're in the same country, they think that that is not good, or they have some judgments because of that ritual. So it shouldn't be, uh, even if it's like bad or good, it's their festival, it's their religious, it's their ritual. So we shouldn't judge them by their rituals or by their festival that they are celebrating all the way.
I find in my world, some of the people that have the most unconscious bias that I notice are actually older family members, um, such as my grandfather or my aunties. So how can we be brave to call out some of our older family members with their unconscious bias?
So yeah, I feel this is like especially true with like maybe immigrants and stuff, because coming into Canada and United States, like compared many other countries, it's much more welcoming, right? And they're more accepting of different like cultures and genders and everything. So many older adults might have stereotypes about stuff coming from where they grew up and how long ago that was, really. So I think just maybe sitting down and showing them a little bit about what the world has become could be a good way to show them what is happening now.
Yes, and helping them understand maybe how there are differences here. My grandfather is an immigrant and he's very strong in his opinions. He's very old world thinking. So I just always have to be brave and call him out when he says something that's maybe inappropriate, or if there's another way to think about it. And I think as young voices, you shouldn't be afraid to share your voices, even with your older relatives. They might sometimes call you out and, oh, why are you talking to your auntie like this? But think of ways to approach it so that it seems respectful and understanding and isn't necessarily coming from a point of aggression or something that they might misunderstand, right? And usually that can be taken over reasonably well. Hannah, would you like to?
I believe that all of us have like this little fire, this little rebellious fire in us, whether it's bigger than others or smaller than others. But I really do believe that just sitting down and having that conversation is so, so important. They have, well, just the older generation, I suppose, they have their own views, right? And those views may not necessarily align with today's world, like Nabiha had said before, right? They need a little bit of an update, approaching it in a very respectful manner so they don't get defensive. It can be tricky, of course, but you know kind of your family best, so you guys have your own little tricks up your sleeve to kind of get through to them, so that's super important.
So, adding on to that, how do you think all of this, these bullying or microaggressions, how do you think it affects your mental health or the mental wellness of your friends and family? Would anybody like to weigh on this question?
I'll weigh in on this question. Yeah, I think bullying can definitely weigh a lot on your mental health, especially when it comes to being around your family and friends, because sometimes some people don't always speak out, and especially if you go home from being bullied, you might become a shut-in, and then that weighs heavily also on your parents, on their mental health, because they don't know what's wrong because you won't speak to them. Yeah, and the same goes for your friends as well if they don't know what's happening. So definitely weighs a lot if you're not willing to speak to someone.
Thank you. And Arusa would like to weigh in. So, Arusa says that I think one of the biggest effects of bullying is on our mental health. Whether it's a short term effect or a long term effect, bullying can really make you doubt yourself, which leads to other problems. It affects not only you, but also your family and friends. Yes. And when we're talking about microaggressions, folks, those are the ones that Arusa had described earlier in our podcast here, that over time they can really add up and be more impactful in the long run. And the areas where we see them impactful is our mental health. And these little slights build up and build up and build up until our mental wellness goes down, or we might have stronger mental health issues popping up. So, how do you think we can stand up against bullying and inspire others to make change? And in relation to that question, who do you think is the best person to talk to if you're being bullied?
I think that talking to someone you trust or that will be able to help you or even like will understand, not necessarily helping, but also like understanding, I think that'd be the best course of action. And then I think that you have to sort of decide for yourself when it's like when you want to take other action.
Yes, if you reach out to somebody you trust, even they don't need to be an adult, it can just be even a friend or a family member. They can sometimes have a different perspective and help you advocate for yourself against that bully.
Another thing is like respecting your friends' boundaries if they do tell you that something's going on with them, because then because you're obviously concerned for them, right? But you also have to respect that they may not want to take any action right now, or they may be scared to do it. So you also have to respect that, because you might end up causing more damage, even if your intentions are good.
Yes. So always make sure to check in with whoever's divulging information to you, whether or not they want you to help them take action or not. Often we can get quite angry once we hear a story of somebody else's, but just remembering that it's not necessarily our story to tell. And really, it's up to them whether they want us to help support them and tell their story. Wonderful points. Any other actions that you think we can do to stand up against bullying? I like this idea of positive allyship here, of being the ally for that other person that's maybe being bullied. So, how can we support others as a positive ally?
I think a way you can be a positive, I think like being an ally to someone who's being bullied is also really important, because you might not be able to do something directly for them, but you're also helping them because they know that you're there and that they can talk to you. And I think that that does a lot more for them.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need to be the one who's telling the story or going to have a protest or calling somebody out. Even just the fact of healing and being there to comfort your friend or your family member, that's valuable enough in itself, right? We all can have different roles in the social change ecosystem, and we can all play to the strengths, our personal strengths. So if yours is as a healer, that's probably the best place for you to work. Yolani said speaking out about it and speaking to other folks. Yes, especially if you have a personal story to share and you want to share it with other folks. Sometimes those can be the most impactful, is being able to tell your story and share it. Any last thoughts for our podcast?
I also think that doing events like this is really important for bullying because you're also able to spread awareness, you're able to learn more, and like you can connect with people at the same time. So I think that this is really a good event to help.
Yeah, it's always beneficial when we're able to work together as a collaborative or a team and share stories and advocate for this change together. Then we're a little less siloed than we are if we're just trying to do this advocacy work on our own. Kaylin or Hannah, do you want to weigh in with some thoughts on how to stand up against bullying and inspire others to make change?
I think the point that was made prior was really important of just even lending an ear to someone, just telling them that you're there for them, you're willing to listen, and if they need help with anything, then you're more than happy to. You don't necessarily have to take action right away, depending on their circumstances, but it is super important that they know that they have someone there to talk to when needed. And it can be daunting if it's an adult, right? It could be a friend, someone you trust, someone your age it's a little easier to tell them that you're there for them.
Yeah, yes, I agree with that 100%. I was bullied in middle school, and if I had like a friend or someone that came up to me and just, talked to me and was my friend and there for me in the moment, not necessarily speaking up to the bully, but like Hannah and others touched on, just being there for me or being there for someone, that definitely helps a lot. That's for sure.
And bullying never goes away as you get older, right? Adults still deal with bullying all the time. So having these strong support networks of how to support yourself and reach out to others for support is very valuable as you go through your life. There's been many a time that I've had a bully at work as an adult, and just knowing who I can trust out of my friends or my coworkers or my peers that can help support me and maybe give me a voice to help advocate for myself.
I definitely agree with that. And especially mental health wise, it always helps somebody that is struggling with bullying or struggling with mental health to know that there is somebody there that they can lean on, that they can trust, that they can talk to about these serious topics. From what I learned, it's just even your presence of being there sometimes is just more than enough to kind of encourage them to take things slow, to advocate for themselves, or even the best possible scenario is just kind of like stand up for themselves and stop the bullying right then and there, than leaving it to kind of drag out. And we've touched on those microaggressions that like build up over time.
Thank you, Hannah, for that point. Yes, sometimes all they need is to be able to unload on somebody. They don't need necessarily advice on what to do next, or they don't necessarily need somebody to be like, okay, I'm going to go fight the battle with you. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just be that supportive ear there for somebody to turn to and share their thoughts and their frustrations. Thank you, everybody. I think we've had some really wonderful insights here. And I love everything that everybody's talked about. If you liked this podcast and you'd like to hear more of our podcasts, we encourage you to check out the other Anti-Bullying Day podcasts on both our Podbean and our Spotify at the Antics Voices. As well, we encourage you to go and think about how you can share your voice in your community and how you can stand up for your friends or family members that might be either dealing with a bully, or maybe they are the ones causing the microaggressions with their unconscious bias and bullying somebody else. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next time.